Hi, Bram. Thanks for agreeing to come here. My first question would be, could you please introduce yourself?
So my name is Bram Crevits. I'm teaching mainly. I work as a curator, and my main subject or field of research and activity is digital culture, the relationship between technology, digital technology, and our culture in general.
As far as I'm concerned, you're really inspired by the theory of Michel Bauwens. Could you please give us a quick introduction what this theory is about?
Well, first of all, I'm not so much inspired by Michel Bowens. I'm very inspired by peer-to-peer practices, um, and he's a very important ambassador for that. What he's promoting is a new kind of society um, where direct connections between participants of that society, supported by tools of digital communication and networking, offers new possibilities for organizing.
Some time ago you had a theory about the connection and relation between art and ideology, the dominant ideology in the society. Is it still relevant to you?
Of course. Well, art is very important, not only to me, but I think art is very important for the society. And art is related to a specific society, not so much to some kind of cosmic, universal thing. But for me, art is what it has a function for a society. It has the same function for a society as what a dream is for an individual. So as a society, we have some kind of goals, we have fears we have to deal with, and like an individual is dealing with these things in his dreams. A society does this in art. So art is crucial, is very important, and is not so much an as we see it over the past centuries, a very individual expression. It's a collective expression, and the fact that this dream is related to ideology is quite evident. I think it's it's a very logical thing that an ideology steers a society toward in a certain direction. Um, so the goals are set there. The fears are related to this. The so this ideology will, and that's what you see in over the history of humanity, is that the dominant ideology and the rulers and the powers of the society are trying to steer or keep control of this dream, of this art. Um, that's I think that's very clear.
But don't you think that there is also the opposite, the other direction, that the art also makes the ideology?
Of course, yeah, of course. There's a double thing. So it's very important to listen to our dreams, to face our dreams. What I really want to say with this is that the art as we know it may not be the most relevant expression of this dream. What we call art with a big A is just one kind of cultural expression, one kind of dream. But the greatest part of our dreams are expressed by completely different parts in our society. I'm talking about mass media, I'm talking about Hollywood, I'm talking about things produced by the capitalist ideology. These are the dominant narratives which are being sold.
Let's now talk about the cyberspace. So, cyberspace is a place, virtual space, where the peer-to-peer gets realized. And as
Go on.
but as far as I understand, you prefer the cyberspace to be ungoverned and to let it go as it goes.
Yeah.
Are there any disadvantages of that? I mean, if people are ungoverned, they can sell drugs or use cyberspace to coordinate violent acts. And you're sure that there shouldn't be any control over it?
First of all, I want to say this is not about cyberspace. When you talk about this peer-to-peer society, it came out of what we learned on the internet. There's a very nice, famous quote even already by Chris Anderson, the former editor-in-chief of Wired, the writer of the book The Long Tail, and stuff like that. He once wrote in the beginning of this decennium, I think it was in 2010 or 2011, he wrote about our current decade, where he said if the past decade, so from between 2000 and 2010, if the past decade was about discovering new organizational and post-institutional models on the internet, think about Wikipedia, and all kinds of different. And think about the way we make use of torrents and stuff like that. But Wikipedia is of course the most prominent example for that.
What's special about it?
Well, I come back to that. But if we discover these post-institutional organizational models in the decade before this decade, then this decade will be about applying them to the real world, and that's what this peer-to-peer society is about. It's about what we learned there to use it today in the offline world, but supported by tools of network and insights of networked communication. And what's so special about Wikipedia? It's very simple. Wikipedia is a very strong and has approach to producing an encyclopedia on a crowdsourced way, so everyone can collaborate. I don't have to tell the story. I think everyone knows this, but what Michel Bowens calls this, we call this peer production, and you can add one extra word to that. It's commons-based peer production. There are a lot of things which are not commodified or should not be commodified. There's the open waters, the sea where everyone can fish. There's the prairies and the mountains where everyone can put his cattle. But there's also information and knowledge, and this it's a very important commons. So the commons movement and the free culture movement and the open source movement all relate to this, and they are very much, they came to existence very much inspired and supported by the internet. Let's call it bluntly. So to make use of new tools, digital tools, and create a network of potential collaborators, peers, and to engage in commons peer, or to facilitate commons-based peer production, can be hyper-productive. That's what Michel Bowens calls it. It's the hyper-productivity. You can by no means compare the production of Wikipedia to the ancient encyclopedia made in the Enlightenment. The speed and the vastness of this body of information is immense. So there's a lot of critique, and there's a lot of critique of people saying, especially from the academic and the world, or from journalism, where people say, there's a lack of accuracy, there's no control, so everyone can add anything to it. I don't agree. It is true, but there's a new. We live in an age where you need a new form of. There's new forms of literacy required to be able to deal with these kinds of information. On the one hand side, there is. I think the level of accuracy is immense, given the fact that it's open and free. You see, and Wikipedia uses a way of control. There is a level of control embedded in the system.
Let's get a little bit more specific. So you say we have learned something in previous decades about how can we peer-to-peer, and what are the real examples? Like, I mean, Wikipedia is internet example, and it goes about the knowledge, but we live in a material world.
Yeah.
We need clothes, we need food.
There are a lot of new and often grassroots initiatives, often based on an app or a platform. I think a very good example is couch surfing. You need a place to sleep, you connect to someone, and you get a bed. That's a very simple example. And this should not be confused with Airbnb or Uber, which are completely the opposite. But you want some more examples? Let's think about it.
And also, isn't Airbnb more popular than couchsurfing?
I think Airbnb is more popular today. But yeah, what we see there, that's really like it's an aberration of capitalism. It's even worse than capitalism. Recently there has been a lot of interesting debate about this, but you know, the Uberification of this peer-to-peer, an important term there is, or word there is the fact that we call this a distributed network, where everyone is connected to everyone, and it's not anymore a centralized network. Now, what these the Ubers or the Airbnbs do, they really these are very centralized companies, which in a way exploit the distributed network, the connection between people, because you deliberately or you have the impression you have a direct link to another one visiting your apartment, or you rent it out, but actually it's not. You are paying one company and very few people getting extremely rich somewhere over in San Francisco. So that's you can relate it to the BBC. The BBC was the British Broadcasting Company as an image is it looks very centralized. It's one central authority distributing media, but in the structure of the BBC there is the decentralized or even open society is embedded in it. The democratic values are embedded in an for the rest centralized medium, which is completely the opposite now. If you look at Airbnb or Uber, there you have a very centralized logic behind what seems to be a decentralized technology, but it's Uber capitalism, we could call it.
But you say people tend to act responsible when they're given responsibility. Doesn't the money in Airbnb make people responsible? Because when you pay money, you want something, and when you are paid, you really have to act responsible, otherwise you're not going to get paid next time.
Yeah.
And in couchsurfing, you can just open another account or whatever.
Yeah. What do you mean? Money makes people responsible?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the problem of our society, that everything has become a contract, and which is completely everything is translated into relationships in economic relationships, where you transfer something, but there's no true engagement. Uh, I'm not uh, I'm not connecting with you. Money is that's maybe the single most meaning of money is not to connect. It's there's something in between us, and that's the value is in there. And we change goods, and there's some kind of very formal contract.
Few years ago, in the year 2009, you were involved in organizing the Sematics Festival in Brussels. Could you tell us a little more about the festival and how is it related to what we are talking now?
Yeah, it's a long time ago, of course. It's even longer than 2009, 2005, or 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, the festival was well, it was a festival for audiovisual performance and VJing, and was related to what came out of an underground, the rave scene and the VJs performing there, and who were maturing, and creating different kinds of stuff which needed different context, and it was interesting to mix what they did with what people regarded as art and not, and to make this kind of remix. It was, for me, it was a meta remix to curate this event. The high art, low art opposition was quite prominent there, but the main thing was that it was about art and technology mainly. And that's something which is very important if you're referring back to what I said about the way Hollywood or our dreams are expressed, always by means of the most the best, the efficient, the newest technologies, and we see that art today quite often doesn't do that. But at the same time, we see that technology has never, and especially information and communication technologies, are of an immense impact and power on our society and our very daily lives.
Is it correct that some time ago you went to Moscow to give there a lecture?
That's a long time ago.
But
yes.
do you remember something about it? What were your impressions? What did you talk about?
That was in the context of the Sematics Festival, where I presented the ideas behind the festival, and it was presented at an art and technology or media art event, which brought together really some very nice and very the top works of at that time of media arts in a rather posh environment, I have to say. It was the Lexus Hybrid Art event. So hybrid referring to the car brand, the car model they have, the ecological hybrid electric and conventional engine. But hybrid also referring to art on the one hand side and the technological thing on the other hand side. What I remember from that is that the audience was hungry. There were a lot of young people coming during the lecture. The presentations by me and other people. I think Dan Rozengaarde was there also, a very interesting Dutch designer artist. I really enjoyed the openness, and I could feel a certain amount of urgency also there, and a hunger of people wanting to build a future and seeing a future. While in Europe, or if you go to the United States, I mean, like the old Western countries, there's a different mentality.
So while I was preparing myself for the interview, I asked different people like what kind of questions can be asked, and I presented also the projects that you're making now with the refugees. And I'm gonna ask this question, and it's just a translation. That's not my opinion.
And the project about refugees has been introduced, or how?
Yeah,
how does
yeah.
it work?
When I was asking people, like I was saying, I'm going
Also
to make.
for the viewers here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
you
this is
introduced
one
it
of my
beforehand?
colleagues actually asking, and I want to talk about this question first, and then get to the description of the open design course with the refugees. But I think
Yeah. Okay. Let's
it's
try.
yeah, it might sound somewhat harsh,
Harsh. Yes.
but I think it's an interesting topic to
Okay.
bring up. I'm just gonna read it aloud.
Yeah.
Why do refugees not want to live and work in their own countries, bring it back to normal there? Why do they move to Europe? Why do they act there as they're at home and try to set their own rules there? Why are they stealing? Do they understand that people don't like them there and are afraid of them? Do they realize that Europe has been building its prosperity for many centuries, which they have nothing to do with?
Wow, that's a utterly stupid question. Sorry. This is really, yeah. That's a big problem. A lot of people think like that. This is a general question about the refugee situation. The refugee people now, for instance, running away from Syria, run away from bombs, bombs by by the Russian government, bombs by their own government. This is why would you stay there? I don't have anything more to say on that.
I just had to ask. Let's talk about the open design course that you have been organizing for the refugees here.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's the last day is tomorrow. And the idea there was that the refugees who came to Belgium were offered to share the skills they have and to learn skills from the other people.
Yeah.
Could you tell me more about it?
Well, it was so we set up a rather experimental course. It was a first test to where we try to offer education possibilities for refugees, because we see a lot of people are very talented and are very well educated, but we need to bypass some administrative barriers, because it's really very difficult to get into regular educational programs here as a refugee, because you don't speak the language, you can't prove your degree, etc. etc. So with this experimental course, which was not an official course, an officialized course where you can earn credits and etc., but it was organized by an official institute. We could offer a high quality learning environment for these people. At the same time, it was it created an opportunity for me to create a new organizational model I've been thinking on quite some time, also inspired by these open source ideas, where you let where we explicitly focus on peer learning, what people know already beforehand. So it's a postgraduate kind of education format, where people get in with a previous degree or previous professional experiences or a certain background. And if you make a good selection, the group of students themselves might offer as much as a teacher can offer. So this relates back to the hyper-productive model I've been talking about beforehand. It's very cheap, because if you need that's the biggest problem for organizing education, is the fact that teachers do cost quite a lot of money. By this way of you need to organize. You need a lot of teachers, but you need far less teachers to give high quality learning to organize that. That's one thing. The other thing is it's an open design course. So open design relates to this open source technology. But it also relates, and open source technology is linked to the fundamental debates we have right now in our open society, which is under pressure. So very fundamental rights, human rights, are at stake due to geopolitics, due to really neoliberal, like harsh capitalism. Think about the Facebooks of these worlds and the Googles. What about privacy? Stuff like that. So these debates of our open society are connected to technology. That's one thing. The other thing is it's about it's about culture as because we're organizing this in a school for art and design. But for me, it was as much as it was about open design as it was about refugees also, because they have all different backgrounds. There are journalists, there are social scientists, there are architects, there are urbanists, there are programmers. So we had a group of 12 people selected out of 80 candidates. They have very different backgrounds, but they had one expertise in common, and that's the fact that they are refugees. So we wanted to keep this subject out of our approach, but it was not possible to do. It was interesting to see how the participants were very were speaking out of a very strong engagement towards our world. And your previous question, where you you read aloud about refugees and about going back to their society and building it there. It's already a long time ago since we've been mentioning the global village. We live in a global world, so also there's a discourse about saying, refugees should integrate here in our society, or others say they should not integrate. They should beyond that discussion, I think we all should integrate into a global society. So it's a common effort. It's a common effort of becoming a global citizen, and starting from a position of engagement, where we engage with this global world. But at the same time, we see when there's an economic crisis, when there's a political crisis, when there's an ecological crisis, people tend to get back into very dangerous, often nationalism, which is really not good. let's call it like that. Another thing, the open source context offers possible, and related to this global citizenship, offers the possibility for these people, for everyone actually, to network. It's about network communication, also about network collaboration, about working together. It was interesting to see how some of the people focused on setting up projects here, designing projects in the European context, or in the local context of Ghent, but others focused on setting up connections back to their country of origin, and creating an exchange or a link with, for instance, Kabul, and how could we organize this kind of course for open design at the University of Kabul, which is extremely interesting to see how this how they really convey this message of a global citizenship. The open source tools have one great advantage. It's about tools and knowledge and information, which is most of the time available for free. So it's as I said, it's about advanced integration, but in a joint effort of we and them, becoming global citizens. It's about debating the ideas of an open society. So this is about that's emancipatory, but it's also very empowering. It gives you the tools and it shows you. That's what we try to do. We offer you a guide to making use and collaborate, and add to this world of open information, open tools, open knowledge. The fact that I said we had a very broad collection, group of people with completely different backgrounds. The dialogue between these otherwise often disconnected fields of society was very interesting, and open design and the openness movement and the open source movement can be applied in any field. So in this way, we aimed at bringing together really the most interesting people, and offering them an opportunity to learn and to engage. And the most interesting was not necessarily the people with the highest degree. It was bringing people together which had skills and expertise and a background, but mainly had an open mind and wanted to share with each other and to share with the world. So it was an extremely challenging project, which was a test for me. So as I say, it was as much about open design as it was about refugees, as it was about education. So in this sense, and that relates to another project I have in mind, where I'm working on. It's called Critical Clouds, and Critical Clouds is a personal, independent research project where I network with other people and try to define, suggest, and create new models of a post-institutional model of education, where you bring people together from different backgrounds, connecting the disconnected society, the different fields of research in today's education, bringing them together, and creating education which is accessible for everyone and which engages with our current urgencies of the world. As I said, economic, ecological, political problems, really urgencies, are not addressed in an adequate way in my opinion, in current educational models and content. I think we need the school should be a tool, an open tool for a world in transition. That's the baseline of the Critical Clouds project. I think the over-specialization has brought great scientific progress, technological progress, but it makes the different fields of research blind.
Bram, let me thank you for coming here and talking to me.
No
and
problem.
To ask just one last question. Imagine our audience are the people who are interested in the society of the future and in the education of the future. What advice can you give to them, basing on your own experience and what we have talked?
An advice.
Yeah.
I think the advice would be in it sounds very stupid, but really I think the doers decide. Do your projects and don't postpone what you would like to do, and just do it without too much research, because when you're doing a test, some civil disobedience is allowed, and it creates a lot of space. So if you have an idea, I think it's important to do it as fast as possible and see the first version as a test, and you will see a lot comes out of that, far more than writing plans and reports and negotiations. I think the doers decide, and everything grows from that. Maybe.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.